The general strides past the line of troops like he owns the ground, 4 silver stars on each shoulder, polished helmet with its 2 stars painted bright, riding boots gleaming, pistols with ivory grips at his hips, around his neck binoculars, across his chest a broad bar of ribbons and medals, distinguished service crosses, distinguished service medals, silver stars, bronze star, purple heart, campaign ribbons, foreign orders. If you freeze the image and look closely, you see almost everything a warrior could wear. But there is one piece of metal that never hangs from George S. Patton's neck. No pale blue ribbon, no 5-pointed star. For all the steel, for all the legend, Bamazza, the most aggressive American general in Europe, never received the Medal of Honor. How can the man so many soldiers remember as the ultimate warrior not have the ultimate medal? And what does that say, not just about Patton, but about how the American system decides what heroism looks like? To answer that, you have to strip the shine off the ribbon bar and look at what the Medal of Honor actually is. And just as important, what it is not. The Medal of Honor is not a best general prize. It is not a lifetime achievement award for a brilliant campaign. It is not a popularity contest or a scoreboard of enemy tanks destroyed. It is by law and by long tradition about something brutally specific. One day, one mission, one moment. The language is familiar, conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of life, above and beyond the call of duty. In practice, that has always meant a very narrow set of circumstances. A person who did something when they absolutely did not have to, under direct enemy fire, with a real chance of dying, often when staying low, staying back, or waiting for orders would have been safer and acceptable. The process reflects how serious that standard is. A Medal of Honor recommendation is not a casual piece of paper. It usually begins close to the event, at platoon or company level for a specific witnessed act. Statements are taken from survivors. The chain of command reviews the action, compares it to the criteria, and if they support it, push it up. Board after board scrutinizes the evidence, aware that this is the highest decoration the country can give. At the highest levels, levels, military and political leaders sign off. Every word in the citation is meant to be backed by testimony. That is why so many recipients are junior officers or enlisted men, lieutenants leading platoons, sergeants and corporals pulling wounded comrades from burning vehicles, privates holding a position alone when everyone else has fallen back, people close enough to the fight that their bodies are at the same level as the bullets. Senior generals do receive the Medal of Honor, but when they do, it is almost always for actions earlier in their careers, when they still carried rifles or led small units personally. By the time an officer is wearing stars, the job itself has changed. He is supposed to think, coordinate, and preserve his life so he can control the battle, not personally storm a hill with a pistol. That is the first uncomfortable truth in the story. The Medal of Honor is structurally aimed at a kind of heroism that George Patton in World War II was no longer supposed to perform. Look at Patton's war as it actually unfolded. In North Africa in 1942-43, he takes command after early American failures. He imposes discipline on a force that had just been slapped hard at Kasserine Pass. Helmets on, boots polished, training ruthless. Under his command, U.S. II Corps fights better in Tunisia, learning the deadly art of armored warfare against the Afrika Korps. Patton is out at the front, visiting units, standing in turrets, taking a feel for the ground. But he is already a corps-level commander. His weapon is no longer a rifle. It is the ability to coordinate divisions, artillery, air support, logistics. In Sicily in 1943, he leads 7th Army in a fast, aggressive campaign. His forces race up the island, seize cities before the official timetable, and beat Montgomery to Messina. He pushes hard, sometimes too hard for Allied politics, arguing over routes and credit. The pace he demands from his men is punishing. The German and Italian forces on the island are forced into a hasty evacuation rather than an orderly defense. Patton helps shorten the campaign, but again his impact comes from his ability to drive an army, not from a single act under machine gun fire. In France in 1944, after the breakout from Normandy, Patton's Third Army becomes a spear that tears across the French countryside. His armored columns slash through German lines, exploiting the rupture created by Operation Cobra. Town after town falls. The southern side of the Falaise pocket slams shut as his units race to cut off retreating German forces. He pushes to the Seine, then toward the borders of Germany. Fuel and supply issues slow him more than the enemy does. His decisions, when to thrust, when to pause, where to gamble, shape the speed and scale of the Allied advance. In Lorraine later that year, the fighting is slower and uglier. Rain, mud, stubborn German defenses, and long supply lines turn the campaign into a grinding slog. Patton still pushes, looking for weak points, maneuvering armored and infantry formations. This is not the stuff of movie glory. It is operational art, ugly and necessary. Then, in December 1944, comes the crisis that will define his legend, the Battle of the Bulge. When German forces surge through the Ardennes, Patton's Third Army is already pointed east. But because of Oscar Koch's intelligence work and Patton's willingness to believe him, contingency plans exist for a 90-degree pivot north. Patton executes that pivot at a speed many thought impossible. His columns grind through snow and ice, fighting their way toward Bastogne to relieve an encircled American airborne division. It is a feat of staff work, logistics, and sheer will. For all of this, the United States Army and its allies shower Patton with decorations. He receives multiple Distinguished Service Crosses for extraordinary heroism and leadership under dangerous conditions. He receives Distinguished Service Medals in recognition of his high-level command contributions. He wears Silver Stars, Bronze Star, and the Purple Heart for a light wound he sustained. Foreign governments award him their own high orders and medals. His uniform is physical proof that the system saw him as brave, effective, and historically significant. The absence of the Medal of Honor is not because some bureaucrat forgot his name. Now put that record beside the criteria you just heard. The Medal of Honor focuses on a specific moment of personal risk at the point of contact. Patton's greatness in World War II was almost entirely at a different scale. By then, he was, in effect, a weapons system, not a weapons bearer. His courage was the courage to demand speed, to accept casualties when he believed the advance would save more lives in the long run, to keep pressing when others might have paused. It was the courage to go forward to observe the front, to expose himself to some danger so he could see the ground. But his job was not to be in the first rank when the artillery landed. You can feel the tension there. If the Medal of Honor is built to celebrate the man who throws himself on a grenade or stands up into fire when he could have stayed down, what do you do with a man whose most consequential heroism is intellectual and moral, choosing to keep moving, choosing to risk some lives now to save others later, choosing to cut through hesitation and turn plans into motion? Patton's defenders might say, isn't that courage too? Isn't it a different, higher form of risk to bear responsibility for thousands of lives and to make decisions that could wipe out entire units if you are wrong? And his critics might answer, maybe it is courage, but it is not the kind the Medal of Honor was written for. That structural gap alone goes a long way toward explaining why that pale blue ribbon never sat beneath his stars. But it is not the whole story. Around Patton's commands, there was always something else swirling: politics, discipline, and the problem of Patton's own mouth. In Sicily in 1943, during hospital visits, Patton slapped and verbally abused soldiers suffering from what would now be recognized as combat stress and trauma. At the time, the Army called such cases battle fatigue, or, in harsher language, suspected cowardice. In at least 2 incidents, Patton confronted men in field hospitals, accused them of lacking guts, struck them, and ordered them out. Staff officers and medical personnel were horrified. The events were reported up the chain. Eisenhower, under pressure to maintain discipline, but also deeply conscious of the need to treat psychiatric casualties more humanely, reprimanded Patton severely. For a time, Patton's career hung in the balance. The incidents, when they reached the American public, caused outrage. Families with sons at the front did not like the idea of a general striking a wounded soldier. Politicians demanded explanations. Eisenhower had to balance his recognition of Patton's operational value against the damage Patton could do to morale and public support. Patton survived that scandal, but it left scars. He lost his immediate frontline command for a period and had to sit on the sidelines while others led high-profile operations. When he returned to prominence, it was with the understanding that his behavior would be watched. Even beyond the slapping incidents, Patton had a gift for saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. He spoke admiringly of the German army in ways that made some uneasy. He made comments about the Soviets that were blunt, sometimes openly hostile, at a time when Allied leaders were trying to preserve a fragile coalition. He talked of future wars against the USSR before the current one had even ended. These remarks, private and public, worried political leaders and senior military figures who were trying to manage not just the battlefield, but alliance politics. On paper, the Medal of Honor is supposed to be insulated from politics. It is about one act, one day. In reality, high-level decorations for high-ranking officers never exist in a vacuum. Awarding the nation's highest military honor to a general whose name had already been associated with scandal, who had required careful damage control, who was seen by some as a political liability, would have been a loaded decision. Ask yourself, in that environment, would any senior board realistically push a Medal of Honor recommendation for George Patton forward, even if someone had written one? It is not that the slapping incidents or the speeches formally disqualified him. It is that they made him a risky symbol. And the Medal of Honor is not just a personal award. It is a symbol held up to the public as the purest example of what the nation values. There is another quiet truth that sits behind this. At Patton's level, the system recognizes commanders differently. For a sergeant, the Medal of Honor may be the most visible form of recognition the country can give. For a general, power itself becomes a form of reward. More stars, larger commands, wider responsibility. In a sense, Patton's medal for his aggression and success was the fact that Eisenhower and the War Department kept giving him more men, more tanks, more of the war to fight. Think about that contrast. A sergeant leads a squad through a murderous crossroads and, in an instant, decides to stay behind and cover their withdrawal alone. He is wounded, keeps firing, and dies. Surviving witnesses tell the story. The chain of command puts his name forward. Years later, his family receives a blue ribbon and a citation. Patton sits in a forward headquarters with telephones ringing, messages coming in from corps commanders, intelligence estimates on the table, weather reports, fuel charts. He decides that 3rd Army will attack here, not there. He orders a risky river crossing. He accepts the forecast casualties and signs the order. Weeks later, thousands of men are one valley further east, and thousands of others, who might have died in a slower, more cautious approach, are still alive. Which of those is more heroic? The system answers by honoring both, but with different tools. One gets the Medal of Honor for a single, sharp moment of self-sacrifice. The other gets command, stars, and lasting strategic influence. You can ask, uncomfortably, does the system quietly assume that if you already command tens of thousands, you do not need the highest medal as well? That your above and beyond is expressed in responsibility, not ribbons. Of course, if you are a Patton admirer, you may not be satisfied with any of this. You might feel the urge to say, but he deserved it anyway. Maybe you would nominate specific moments. His personal presence near the front in North Africa, under shell fire, rallying units that were wavering. The way he drove through Sicily, taking Hill 609 and other key positions with an aggressiveness that broke the enemy's cohesion. The speed of the armored thrusts across France, surely somewhere in there was an act that met the standard. The relief of Bastogne in the Bulge, was that not worthy of the highest honor? Those are real achievements. They absolutely justified the Distinguished Service Crosses he received, which themselves represent a very high level of risk and leadership beyond normal expectations. They justified his DSMs, Silver Stars, and foreign decorations. They justified his rapid promotions. But if you read actual Medal of Honor citations from World War II, the pattern is clear. They do not say, for brilliantly commanding an army through a successful campaign. They say things like, for single-handedly attacking an enemy position, killing X number of enemy soldiers, rescuing wounded comrades, and holding the position despite multiple wounds. They are zoomed in tightly on the individual body and the individual moment. If we start broadening that to for directing a months-long campaign with skill, we fundamentally change what the medal represents. We start turning it into a best campaign trophy. That would invite endless comparisons between commanders and between wars, and it would push the recognition away from the enlisted men and junior officers who in many ways embody the medal's original purpose. So you are left with a dilemma. To award Patton the Medal of Honor for his overall impact would be to twist the criteria. To hold to the criteria means acknowledging that his greatness lived at a level the medal was never designed to measure. There is one more piece to this, and it may be the most ironic. Patton's legend is so big that in a strange way he has something many Medal of Honor recipients do not: immortality in the public imagination. Ask a random person on the street to name a famous American general from World War II, and Patton is almost guaranteed to be one of the first names. Movies, biographies, documentaries, arguments about his genius and his flaws. These keep his memory alive. His personality, for better or worse, has become shorthand for a certain type of hard-driving commander. Now ask that same person to name 3 Medal of Honor recipients from World War II. Outside of a few famous names, most people will struggle. Their stories are on plaques and citations. Their families remember. Specialists and enthusiasts know them, but they do not loom over the culture the way Patton does. So here is a question no medals board is ever going to put in writing, but that is worth thinking about. If you could offer a general choice between one more piece of metal on his chest, an enduring myth, the kind of myth that makes people still argue about you 80 years later, which would he really choose? You cannot ask Patton that. He is long gone. But you can ask yourself, does the lack of a Medal of Honor diminish what he did? Or does his outsized reputation actually overshadow the quiet, often unknown courage of those who did wear that blue ribbon? In the end, the question, why didn't Patton get the Medal of Honor, forces you to confront a deeper issue. What do you actually think heroism is? If you stand in front of a display of his uniform and stare at the ribbon bar, that missing medal jumps out only if you expect the highest award to follow the highest fame. Patton's life suggests a different frame. He was brave. He took personal risks. He had a temper that hurt people. He drove his men hard. He made operational decisions that saved some and condemned others. It could not be otherwise in that kind of war. He wore more medals than most. He made enemies at home and abroad. He helped break the back of the Wehrmacht in the West. He died in a car accident, not in a blaze of glory. The Medal of Honor, by design, passed him by. The system did not decide he was a coward or unworthy. It simply applied a narrow lens to a man whose impact was broad. So now the question comes back to you. If you command thousands of men, is it more heroic to run to the front line and risk your own life, or to stay back, safer physically, and carry the burden of choosing who will fight and who will die? When you imagine greatness in war, do you see a ribbon on a uniform or the shape of the front lines on a map? If you had to stand in front of the families of Third Army and explain why their sons came home, or did not, would they care more about one missing piece of metal on your chest or about how you used the power you had? Was the system unfair to Patton? Did it protect the integrity of the Medal of Honor? Did it quietly punish him for his scandals? Or did it simply recognize that some kinds of courage cannot be captured in a single citation? There is no neat answer. There probably never will be. That is why this question still burns. In the comments under a video like this, you will see it play out in real time. He should have had it. He didn't meet the criteria? The medal system is broken. No, it worked exactly as intended. Maybe that is the last irony. For a man who thrived on conflict and controversy, whose whole life was an argument with the world about what it means to be a soldier, even his missing medal has become a battlefield.